Yeah, we met
That's
earlier. I was gonna
Martha,
say
but
that's not the Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order. The first thing I want to do is welcome Patricia Birch, CEO of Habitat Wake. And I think, maybe we should just go around the board here and tell Patricia what our background is so that she knows what she's getting herself into. You can't back out now, but this is just for information. So,
Well, and we just did that, so.
Patricia, is there anything you wanted to add to my introduction?
No, I'm excited to be here and I appreciate you guys letting me join you.
Glad to have you. Molly?
And we just did this whole thing. So I'm Molly Rogers and retired from Housing Finance Agency. Been a part of this since its inception.
Oh, okay, very good.
Hi, I'm Elena Money-Garmin. I'm new. This is my second meeting, and I'm a home builder. I own Garmin Homes.
Okay. Oh, that's where I knew your name.
Yeah.
Hi, Patricia. Of course, Patricia and I know each other, but I'm with the Home Builders Association of Raleigh-Wake County, and I'm one of the original board members of this board.
Patricia, you know me. I'm a construction volunteer and also advocacy ambassador for Habitat, but also on the Western Region CAC Affordable Housing Action Group advocacy team. And that's unpronounceable as an acronym.
Rhett Fussell. I'm now a consultant to the Raleigh Area Land Trust. I did start the Raleigh Area Land Trust, which is what got me here on the board. And I'm an original board member, as Paul said.
Jacob Rogers, Triangle Community Coalition. You and I know each other. It's good to see you again.
Tina Sherman. What is my official role here? I am a planning board. I'm chair of the planning board and a liaison to the planning board. I think that's my official role.
Audra Killingsworth. I'm on the town council and kind of one of the original members of the board as well. So.
Yep. Okay, welcome everyone. Marla, should I have the staff introduce themselves? It's up to you.
Yeah, we can meet the housing staff.
I'm Lamont Taylor, Housing Programs Manager.
Hello, I'm Rebecca Schamberger, Housing Specialist.
Okay, all right. I think that covers everyone. So the first thing on the agenda is to go over the regular meeting minutes from June 4th. I had, turns out, a bunch of comments on that. So many so that I'm actually going to make a proposal that my comments be sent around with any other comments that people have, and we kind of do approval by email instead of doing it here, because if we do it here, it's going to take some time, quite a bit of time actually. I want to emphasize that I thought whoever did the minutes did a really good job, because they were a good basis for me to take a look at and compare to the recording of the session. But there were some misspellings and some things left out, and I would feel more comfortable as a chair if we provide some time to go over the corrections, and then we can approve them by email. I believe that's still, Ashley, are we able to do things by email like that?
If I make it back to you on that.
Okay, all right.
I'm not 100% sure. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, I think we've done something like that before, but
I've never done that before in my 5 years of clerk, so that would be new to me. But I would like to look that up.
so let me suggest this. If we have time at the end of the agenda, it's a pretty full agenda, but if we have time at the end of the agenda, we can at least start going over some of the comments I have. One of the problems is that I have the only copy, and so we might be a little handicapped in that.
Might I suggest, Chair, that we actually just send it back around with the next agenda and we approve them in our next meeting?
That's fine with me. Yeah.
That works.
I'll take that idea.
Yeah, okay, so we'll do it that way. Thanks, Tina. Okay, with that then, we'll get right into the annual housing report and the housing data dashboard by Lamont.
Well, good afternoon, and again, I'm Lamont Taylor with the Community Development and Housing and Neighborhood Connections Department. So I'll just give you a high-level overview of some of the things we did in the department last year to serve our residents. Of course, included in the agenda materials was a table of contents, and so we'll kind of go through all of the items listed here to give you a summary of our activities this year. So we wanted to start by sort of defining housing affordability, and you've probably heard this before, but typically housing programs measure affordability in terms of percentage of gross income used towards housing costs. And so 30% is sort of the magic number nationwide for that indicator. And so that means that a household spends no more than 30%, or roughly 1/3 of their gross income on housing, including utilities. So of course, another measure that you've heard many times is the area median income for the Raleigh metropolitan statistical area. And of course, that's the median, and Apex is part of the Raleigh MSA. And typically, affordability, especially when you're using federal funding, is targeted to households earning 80% or below the area median income. And just to give you an idea of, for context about the growth in Apex, as of June 2024, the median sales price here locally was $656,000 for a single family home. Back in 2021, the town created a framework to achieve a vision that welcomes folks to Apex of diverse backgrounds and supports opportunities for affordable, safe, sanitary, and quality housing that meets the needs of persons of all incomes, ages, and abilities. And to the right of this slide is the recommendations that came from the Affordable Housing Plan that was developed and adopted back in 2021. So moving on to sort of what the department worked on during the course of the year in terms of unit production was the construction and now the occupancy of Stone Glen Apartments, which is a 164 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartment community for families. 100% of the units are considered affordable and targeted at incomes of $48,920 to $85,610 for a family of 4. And of course, in terms of area median income, that would serve between 40% AMI and 70% AMI. So just some highlights and to spotlight the project. It's located conveniently right off the Apex Peakway with access to highway systems as well as numerous shopping and employment opportunities. Again, it's a 164 unit development for low-income families equipped with community spaces, on-site management, a fitness area, as well as a picnic area. DHIC developed the property with the assistance of the town to the tune of $12,286 per unit, Wake County $29,268 per unit, and of course federal tax credit equity at $86,109 a unit. The rent ranges from $1,293 to $1,550 a month. The total development cost was right about a little over $48 million. And as you see, an investment from the town of a little over $2 million, Wake County $4.8 million, and again, the other funding sources are indicated here on the chart. We also wanted you to get a glimpse of what the property looks like on the inside, and so we provide some pictures here that it's just a really well-built construction as well as absolutely beautiful furnishings. So wanted to show you that as a highlight, as well as the community playground in the last picture. In terms of projects in the pipeline, well, there is Abbey Spring, and it is a proposed 84-unit multifamily development. The developer, Evergreen Construction, and to provide an update on where that project is in the pipeline, it is stalled right now. There is an existing funding gap of a little bit over $4 million, And so there has been a lot of conversations with Evergreen as well as the county to think about how to reduce that debt, reduce the gap, I'm sorry, not the debt, reduce the gap so that this project becomes a feasible project. But right now it's somewhat infeasible because of that gap. So,
Lamont, can I ask a
yes.
question?
Mhm.
4 million out of what? Out of what's the total? Do you have any idea what?
I don't know the total.
Okay.
I don't know the total. We can get that for you.
It used to be 18 million, but I think that's changed.
So
That has-
20-ish million. So
It might be
quarter of
about 20 right now. Good question. And as you know, since 2021, the town has collaborated with Rebuilding Together of the Triangle to assist residents with needed repairs to preserve their housing, to correct hazardous structural conditions, and to help them to age in place. And so Rebuilding Together of the Triangle continues to administer our program, which of course is financed by the town's Affordable Housing Fund. And during the most recent fiscal year, 23-24, RTT completed repairs on 6 homes occupied by residents at an average cost of $25,922 per unit.
Is that an average cost to the town or an average cost to Rebuilding Together? Because I know we had to raise funds in some areas.
Great question. And so that is a combination of the two. And excellent segue to the next slide. As you are also aware, back in June, we brought to you a recommendation to expand the Apex Cares homeowner rehabilitation program. And we call it homeowner rehabilitation. I guess it's actually also available in some cases to renters. So we made some program changes to not only increase the amount or the maximum amount of assistance that a household could be served with, but also to really break out those programs into very neat categories so that it's clear to everybody what is available.
For the weatherization, is that 2,500 or 25,000?
That should be $2,500, and thanks for catching that. Yeah, 2,500 there. And just a quick update on the revised Apex Cares program and the pending contract with Rebuilding Together of the Triangle. We hope to get that on the agenda as an item in September. So we'll be working to finalize the negotiation of that contract and get it on the agenda for
In
one of the
September?
September
You mean
meetings.
this meeting or December?
September.
Council meeting.
Council.
Oh, the council meeting.
The council meeting.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yes, the council meeting. And adopted in June 2023 was the Affordable Housing Incentive Zoning Policy, which of course encourages developers to provide affordable homes or lots as part of a proposed development in exchange for incentives. And of course the chart here provides the rezoning cases approved by the town or town council that designated affordable home units during fiscal year 23-24.
Why does it not indicate what the incentives were? It says incentive NA.
There weren't any.
There weren't any.
Oh,
They opted in without an incentive.
okay.
So just at 23 units there of a total 970.
Do we have any sense of conversations that may have happened around either of these or other rezonings that happened and why it ended up at no incentives?
Great question, and I do not because I was not here.
You're still learning it.
When those negotiations took place, he wasn't part of our team
I wasn't
yet.
part of the
Yes.
team,
But
so
Rebecca can address that because she sits on the technical review committee.
Yeah, I wasn't on the team when these passed either, but to get into the incentive, you have to opt into 5% minimum. And neither of these opted into the 5%. So since they didn't opt into that minimum, they didn't include an incentive.
So then, and I have a follow-up question. This may be coming to you, and that is, what is the council's then approach if these both were approved with no incentive, then there was obviously some validity to their desire to participate at some level, but the council approved it without sort of forcing the issue for a little more. So my question is like, why? I mean, and how does that, I mean, doesn't that sort of go against the incentive policy? So I'm just trying to figure out where the disconnect is.
Sure.
So
The priorities were varied in these particular types of developments. So in certain areas, the priorities can change to like maybe environmental related issues or connectivity related issues. And in order to financially make things work for the developer, there has to be a mix of things instead of just focusing on one thing. So
Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because I think both in a recent planning board meeting, maybe earlier this spring, and a prior housing meeting, I named that that we need to have some real conversations around environmental and connectivity and the competition of those two. And I'm not going to say what that should look like, as much as if we're coming back to what are the town's priorities. To Rhett's point, if we're saying we want 5%, is that what we want?
is it what I want? Absolutely.
Well, and I appreciate that. But I posed, and I looked at you, but I posed to the council, I posed to the council that I think this is a real conversation, and so something is going to have to give. I have heard from our developer friends and our builder friends that we cannot have it all.
Sure.
And so council, as you were listening to this later, needs to make some really tough decisions. And I don't know what those answers are. But I am hearing, and I think one of the things that we came out is when we were trying to get the incentive policy out the door was when we then see at the annual report, where things land, we can see here that if those were part of the concerns, then we need to revisit, are we going to continue to compromise, or is one of these priorities, and I realize that this is probably one of many priorities the council has, one of these priorities going to be front and center? And I will say, in planning, on the planning board meeting, I have been very clear about the fact that, my charge, as I understood it, is to help ensure that we do have more affordable housing. That we have worked really hard on connectivity. We have worked really hard on environment, and we made great strides there, and I don't want to diminish that, but if we need to, we do need more affordable housing, and that needs to surface now. So I am asking council, when you watch this later, to make some serious, to consider what are the priorities.
Sure. And I would like to lay out an example. For those of you that watched the last town council meeting, there was a 3-2 vote on a particular development. And the developer basically brought up, connectivity issue versus an affordable housing issue. Well, the connectivity outweighed the affordable housing in this particular instance because we had a bridge that was supposed to cross over this area that would cost taxpayers millions of dollars. Or, you have can they provide affordable housing? Well, they can't provide affordable housing and provide this massively expensive bridge at the same time. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of different priorities weighing out depending on where it is, on what it is, on how it's laid out. If it came in as a smaller development, there would be no way they could even afford doing the bridge. So it really does depend on the exact one that comes before y'all and before us. And sometimes it is a difficult decision in weighing all the different factors that are priorities between all the different council members. So, yeah, but I appreciate you bringing that up.
And I'd like to, go ahead, Paul.
Well, I was going to say that, we spent a number of years working on this housing incentive zoning policy. And we're taking your presentation hostage, but this particular slide is very important to us.
Yeah.
It is.
And I was really a broken record on the concept of an incentive zoning policy won't work if the incentives are not incentivizing. And the fact that we've only got 2 projects here and neither one of them were willing to go to 5% tells me we need to work on the incentives some more. And I remember one of the incentives had to do with, I believe it was expedited permitting, but you had to have, the initial draft said 50%.
Right.
And I said, why is it so high? And they said, we were afraid we'd get overrun with projects unless we set it really, really high. And I said, that's not going to happen. And so I think the numbers we're seeing right here is reflective of we need to reevaluate those incentives.
Right.
The proof's in the pudding. They did not incentivize, and maybe revisit that. That obviously is a whole other meeting to get through.
Sure.
Many meetings.
But I think this shows us that
Yeah.
that was right.
Yeah. So Rhett, and then I'm going to finish, and then
Okay.
we're going to proceed with the.
Yeah,
the
sorry, we have hijacked, but again, I'm with Paul. This is like, there's a reason, right? I mean, the HAB was here for a reason, and so this is probably the most important slide of the whole presentation for us as a board, right? So to me, I agree that we also agreed when we approved that in 2023 that we would revisit it exactly a year later. And here we are in September, and we have not had any discussions around that. So keep your thought there, Paul, because that's going to come up later.
Yeah.
But my point here in asking the original question, and thanks, Tina, for adding some things, is I think, one, the NA on the incentive, there needs to be a note on each one of these as to why the decision was made, so that we can, one, know that, and two, use that to form some opinions about moving forward. Second thing is, I just wanted to be on the record that I'm very disappointed that of the 900, almost 1,000 units that we're going to get, 23 units, which is about 2%, right? So we've now put ourselves in more of a hole.
Yes.
After this year. And to me, that's a little depressing. The other part of this is that it's depressing is that the rental portion of this is only good for 10 years.
Right.
That means that really what we got was 0.5% or less after 10 years of usage. So I just wanted that on the record to know that, that's
good,
my
'cause
concern, right?
You brought up the points I was going to bring up, and I think we need to think and we need to negotiate with Marla and her staff about when the affordable housing incentive zoning policy is updated, because I've heard it won't be until sometime after the middle of next year, and I think it really needs to happen sooner than that. So
Yeah.
we can talk about that.
So Chair Welch, I do hear that you were ready to move, but I just exclamation point to, like, this feels, as I was reading this and reviewing the materials, I was like, this really can't be NA, and I need more. And I'm in complete agreement, because I was there with you when we were trying to settle the, like, this is where we're gonna land, and we have to reevaluate. I think waiting till next September or next year is completely unacceptable. I think we need to revisit this at our next meeting. And I think we need some clear direction from council, because council has to have our back. And if they're not gonna hold builders to what the incentives are, then we're doing this circular motion that's not getting us anywhere. And so I feel like, while yes, we need to re-examine and we need to ensure that the incentives are incentivizing, we also have to ensure that our governing body is going to have our backs, have the community's backs, and say, we are holding to these incentives again, so that we can then continue to ensure that we're incentivizing in the right way. If council's going to come back and continually say, well, no, we're okay with 2%, well, then we don't need to set our target at 5%, bottom line. And that's okay, mostly. but we just need to be clear that that's what we're putting out, and that's what we're going to get back. So if we could add that to December's meeting, I think that's going to be really critical going into 2025.
So Tina,
Yes,
hold
sir.
that thought, because I do have a presentation on inclusionary zoning that I'm going to go through. and there's a middle ground between the mandatory and the voluntary, which is conditional. And I think that I have some agreement from the staff that maybe that's where we need to be going. So
That's how we've gotten this, what we have gotten is through conditional zoning.
So conditional zoning is not working because,
Well, I mean, we've gotten built units basically as conditions as part of what we're doing already. So we are already doing that middle ground, just not at the amounts that we're talking about in the incentive policy.
okay, well,
That's what I'm saying.
again, it's a good sign that we need to revisit the policy, I guess. Okay, I'm going to hand it back to Lamont.
Thank you. I'm back.
Oh, Lamont's still here.
Talking about housing instability, the town joined the Wake Continuum of Care, or COC, membership this year or last year as an organization, and they provide homelessness and housing stability services and resources for residents through coordinated through that entity. And by joining the membership, the town works in collaboration with other membership organizations and municipalities to end homelessness and alleviate its hardships in all communities in Wake County. And some of the services that can be accessed currently through the Wake Continuum of Care are indicated on the slide for you here. The Housing Connections program, approved by Town Council in June of 23, fiscal year 23-24, provides a pathway for residents who are experiencing homelessness in Apex or at imminent risk of becoming homeless. And it assists them with accessing available supportive services to stabilize their housing situation, which may include housing stability case management services, housing navigation, as well as a number of other supportive services. So next up is Community Connections. In April, our department hosted the Housing Fair, 2024 Housing Fair, which was an event that allowed community members to learn about a variety of topics related to housing from 30 present organizations. In addition, 2 workshops were hosted entitled Preparing for Homeownership and Fair Housing and Tenants' Rights. In conjunction with the Housing Fair was the Think Apex Day, and which included Think Revitalize in partnership with Rebuilding Together of the Triangle and Habitat for Humanity, my goodness, all these words, of Wake County. These groups, along with staff and volunteers, completed home repairs for an Apex resident in the Justice Heights neighborhood. And of course, those repairs included structural repairs, accessibility modifications, external home repairs, painting, and yard beautification. And of course, in addition to this activity, members of the Apex Fire Department visited homes in the neighborhood and provided smoke alarms for residents as well.
And our own council member Killingsworth was one of the volunteers that helped on the homeowners' repairs in Justice Heights.
Yay.
It was fun.
It was fun. And again, I am sure you know the role of the Housing Advisory Board, but we include this slide as this will be part of our publication once published. And the actions of the board include the approval and recommendation to Town Council, the expansion of the Apex Cares program to add more services, as well as the Housing Connections program. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Okay, so I was waiting. So I did go over to Stone Glen on Friday. It is DHIC does quality work, I have to say. And I think it will last. I mean, it's hard to judge now, but just looking at it, it looks like it's really good quality. They were finishing up somewhere around 24 or so units. So of the 164, I guess 140 were available. They said there were about 70 vacant units. So I don't know, probably no more than 100 units have been occupied. So, I don't know how we, score this, but probably by the end of the last fiscal year or the end of June of this year, probably something like half of the units were occupied. To me, when the units get occupied, that's when we count them. I mean, that's when people don't have to be homeless. They can actually have an apartment or a home or whatever. The other thing is, the numbers that you quoted in terms of the rents are accurate, but it's really a range of rents. And so the 1293, actually, the rent can be as low as $820 for a 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment, which is really good for this area, right? The high end of that, what I'm saying is that there are ranges, and I asked for the, both the bottom and the top of the range, because if I only look at the top of the range, it's like, well, that's not really that affordable.
Well, I think you were quoting for a family of 4.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, well, and I was, well, that's interesting then, but in any case, there are ranges, and the quotes I was hearing was like a 1-bedroom apartment, about 700 square feet, was $890 a month to $1,293. I think that was the number that you.
And I used the higher end, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that would be a little cozy for a family of 4, but that's okay. They're a family. The 3-bedroom, which is probably more appropriate for a family of 4, was $953 to $1,778. So, when I first saw the numbers that you had, it was like, wow, there was a lot of tax credit, subsidy here, but what did it really accomplish? So, it's a little tricky. I think it depends on what the household income is. That's my only point there. I did get to.
Bill?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I add a little additional context on
Sure,
that?
sure.
So DHIC actually utilized income averaging. So some of the rents can go up for people who are 70%. So that's part of the higher range, is because they used income averaging, and they can actually rent to people who are at 70% AMI.
Okay.
So not just the 60% and below for tax credits.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so what does income averaging mean exactly? I'm not sure.
That gets real technical, and it's something that the State Housing Finance Agency has to approve in the award of the tax credits and so forth. So that's almost a seminar by itself. So, I mean, we can share and get you information on that a little later, but that's part of the reason why you have a slightly higher range in the rents that can be made available.
Good clarification. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then, so we do have the Abbey String 84 senior affordable housing project that's in the pipeline. And I guess my question is there any possibility of, and I know Evergreen is pretty good at finding the gap funding and so forth, but is there any possibility of, like, the housing department or the planning department, anyone sitting down with Evergreen and saying, have you tried this? Have you tried this? And in terms of facilitating getting that gap filled and getting because it's been sitting there for a few years, and I'm afraid they already extended their tax credits a year or two, and so I don't want them to lose their tax credits.
So that's a great question, and the answer to that is yes. We, of course, the county taking the lead because they're a senior lender in this project.
Yeah.
We've talked with Evergreen. We've had a couple of meetings since my time here, and we still arrive at a $4 million gap. And the expectation is that at some point they bring us back something that says that they've been able to reduce that, and we can talk at that point. So right now the gap is still $4 million after those discussions.
Okay, but there have been discussions.
There have been ongoing discussions. Yes.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Good to hear that. On Apex Cares, the 6 homes that were quoted, did that include the home that was done during the housing fair? Was
That does not, because that was a volunteer effort.
Okay.
So
Well,
that was not
okay,
one that,
okay.
yeah, that was volunteer. So we didn't actually underwrite the cost
Okay.
of it.
So,
So we did 7, if you count that.
So I'm just curious, 6 homes over a year sounds like it's not enough. And what is the issue? Is the issue capacity of RTT? Is the issue getting households through the screening process? I'm just curious why, because, $25,000 a home to rehab a home and keep it in the inventory, to me, that's a bargain. Because if we just saw with DHIC and so forth, $48 million for 164. I don't know what that breaks down to in terms of cost per unit, but I can guarantee you it's much more than $25,000. So what can we do to raise that number for this fiscal year we're in?
What we can do to raise the number is we can, and I can't speak to the former contract again because that was before my time.
Okay.
But one of the things that we are going to do going forward, and I'm speaking for the town, not RTT, is we're going to take a more active role in marketing the program. So that's one thing.
Okay.
And then the other thing you will recall is that the maximum assistance is now $40,000.
Yes.
And it really defines out what repairs are eligible.
Mm-hmm.
And they include, of course, you'll remember this as well, major system repairs.
Yeah.
And so that may be a better product in the market for the folks we're trying to serve, because again, we have this range of programs, and so you can kind of get in where you fit in kind of thing if you're income eligible. And so the goal there is to not only increase production, but to also offer, again, a broad range of services without them just kind of being under one umbrella and you've got to decide what you need.
Okay.
So that's the answer to that.
So part of it's the breadth, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Like, hey, we're going to offer more,
niche
ways
programs.
to
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Do
That's helpful.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Do you know how many people RTT has on their intake list in Apex?
It is my understanding, and Rebecca, you can check me if I'm wrong on this. I asked this earlier. I don't believe that there is a current wait list, if you will. So there are not folks who we've not been able to serve who are waiting.
Are we allowed to know how much you're thinking about doing the contract for with RTT? How much funding is
We
for?
have agreed on a price per unit, including the assistance to the household. And again, that's something that's going to go to council in the next 2 meetings.
Okay.
And so it'll be kind of public record then.
So I think in the past, the budget for Apex Cares, when it was just the owner rehab, was about $250,000, $250,000.
Yes.
I think that's going up to somewhere in the neighborhood of $650,000.
That's correct.
So when that number was estimated or budgeted or whatever, is there any, how many homes were assumed could be rehabbed for that amount of money? I'm looking for a target for like this fiscal year. Is it like 20 or?
So it's an average of 10 households in each program.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that would be like 40 households then.
That's correct.
Okay. All
Yes.
right.
Give or take, because of course you don't know what the uptick in the demand
Well,
will be, but yeah.
I mean, that's way better than 6, so I'm happy about that.
I do have a question, kind of just thinking, piecing together what I've heard, that we had up to $40,000 per home that could be spent.
Correct.
And on average, it was a little under 26,000.
Correct.
And there aren't any homes on the waiting list.
It is my understanding that there are not.
So it doesn't sound like that it was inadequately funded.
It was not inadequate.
It sounds like there was another, either word didn't get out about it or, something like that.
Yeah.
So did the threshold change in June of 2024 to the 40,000?
Yeah.
It actually did not. It changed programmatically because we got agreement from council. We got approval from council to move forward. However, the program changes come with the new contract that we've negotiated.
Okay, but it was 40,000 was the max before, or that's now changed?
No, the max was not 40,000
Okay.
before. It was changed in June.
I think it
Okay.
was 20,000 before.
It was
right?
20,000 before.
Okay,
And the reason that the average is 26,000 is because RTT was also fundraising to provide financing to
Extra,
assist the residents.
Yep.
So that's another reason for hence the program change.
thank
Do we
you.
have an idea what those marketing, what the marketing is gonna look like to start to get the word out a little more?
We do not at this time, but we will work with RTT to do most of that heavy lift on the Apex team side. Because again, we agreed to do most of the marketing from the town, which we previously did not do, or we had not done.
And then Audra just suggested churches, and I'm also wondering through utility bills.
We've got a range of options, but we don't have a strategy as such. But it would definitely be outreach. We've got our community engagement team kind of assembled right now, and so there would be a opportunity there as well. So we can work with some of the local agencies. Of course, churches, the faith community gets the word out, and then of course the town can put it out in our water bills or utility bills.
Okay, any other questions for Lamont?
Oh, go ahead.
You go.
Nope, you go ahead.
So, is there any concern with assisting landlords? Does that not give anybody heartburn except me?
Great question, and actually two things there. One, it's patterned after Wake County's program, and two, we realize that there are renters who definitely need to have not their home, it is their home, they don't own it, but their home rehabilitated. And so there's not a whole lot of concern because there'll be sort of the instrument that we kind of, the debt instrument will basically be a 5-year forgivable loan for the landlord. And if the landlord fails to rent to a low-income household under 65% over the course of that 5 years, the loan becomes 100% repayable. So that's one incentive. And then the other incentive is a 10% owner contribution. So the owner has to have some skin in the game as well.
Thank you.
And then my only comment is, I think you all should take credit for the fantastic dashboard that was put together that we talked about. I think that was this year, so I would encourage you to include that in this report,
Yes.
because
Okay.
that, to me, is one of the
Agreed.
best things we have done recently. Not to say there aren't other things, let me say that very clearly to the team.
Should be recognized.
Yes, but that should be recognized. And then my final point is, I would like to see in this summary, or if there's a document that's going to be produced, the total number of units produced in Apex, total households, not just affordable, total households, and then the total affordable units that were produced during this year, if there's a report for that, right? That's one. And then second, how does that apply towards the gap that was originally created in the original housing plan, so that we can measure, because to date we are not measuring anything that I've seen. I haven't seen it, right? So I don't, there's no end of the year report that tells me this is how we're doing. So that's what I'm trying to accomplish by having you include that here. So that would be my suggestion, is to include both of those items if possible.
Yeah. Okay.
One of the things that I was thinking about, when we get our report, our development report, at planning board and at council, we get a list of like EAB recommendations, right? And we get added or not added for each and every one. That might be a good thing to do for housing as well, when it comes to that discussion on affordable housing, either added or not added. That way we can see, the discussion was had that they decided to add this incentive, not that one, I think that would be a good way for us to track what's happening as well.
Agreed.
So I'll say to all those concerns, this is not the final product. This is actually just really high level. We can incorporate those to the extent possible in the published report, which we are working with Town Communications right now to produce. So thanks for that feedback, and we'll incorporate as possible.
We'll also have access to the development dashboard that planning puts together quarterly, where they track both the number of units produced as well as those that are affordable. So we have that.
Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure it's
And we also link it on our
Your take
website. We link it on our page as well. So basically, you'll find it in two places, under planning and under housing.
Thank you.
So, one last thing. Previous annual housing reports have kind of gone back to the recommendations that were made in the affordable housing plan and said, okay, here's what we've done in each of the areas. I think that's a good idea. Even if there's nothing that's been done, maybe that indicates a place where there's more effort needs, in the coming fiscal year. Most of them, you probably touched on, but there are a couple, for instance, support for home ownership for first-time home buyers. I don't think we really, dipped into those waters at this point. So you might want to go back and look at those recommendations that were on your page number 3 and see. That's another way to look and see if there's anything that you missed, like Rhett was pointing out.
I also know that part of that too, there were timelines associated with that, and I think that was a long-term timeline.
Yes.
If I remember right. So yeah, and I don't exactly remember what long-term timeline meant.
I think
but
short-term was 1 to 2. I think
5 to 10.
and then there was 3 to 5, and then after 5, something like that. But
Correct.
we're in the mid-range time frame right now.
Understood.
Yeah.
So
And we dipped our toes into that a little bit during the housing fair. That's why we had the workshop we did with Truist Bank to kind of start us down that path while we try to figure out how we might be able to support closing any gap for homeownership, because you can stack the money from Wake County along with the NCHFA, and what the town would have to put in is still well over $100,000 in order to close a gap. And so that's one of our big challenges with how we support home ownership, is how do we close the gap on the purchase price. And so to be continued.
but work's being done on it.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. We are definitely working on it.
You guys mentioned that you're developing a draft report. Do we get that report before it goes to council? What's that? I just want to understand the process.
Yes.
Okay. Just was curious what the process was, because I don't recall seeing it before. We probably did. I just don't remember.
Yes, it was presented to you in December of last year, and we gave about 30 days for comments, and then we finalized the report after that.
I remember that now. Yep.
Okay.
Thanks.
You're
I
up
know,
next.
right? Yes, it has been.
And if I could get Madam Clerk to come and tee us off for the next.
The Affordable Housing Plan update.
I was going to actually show you, not demonstrate the dashboard, but just kind of show you, because it is
Yes.
it is not live yet.
Is this the one you?
No, that's the website that we sent you. It's not live. We're going to get it live. We're just trying to figure out exactly where, because the other thing that's going on, and you'll love this as well, is that we are revamping our website.
Yes.
So there will be a number of additions to that website that will provide residents a range of information, not just necessarily about what the town of Apex is doing, but the other services that are available to them with our partner agencies.
Gonna make it larger.
And so I'm just going to kind of show you the dashboard. And again, it's not published, but when we publish it, we'll make sure you got the link as well as put it on our website. So I'm just going to kind of scroll down and show you some of the features that are here. Homes by tenure type, percent change in population over time. I won't read all of them, as you can read them for yourself. Net change in population by race and ethnicity, population by age group, family poverty rate over time, share of homes that are vacant and available over time, housing permits for both buildings and homes over time, homes built by decade, and deed-restricted affordable housing over time. And so it provides a great deal of information about the market forces leading to our market.
Impressive.
So is there anything in there on cost-burdened households or severely cost-burdened households? Because that's
Yes, that's
kind of,
Lamont, could you go up? I think there's another tab.
There is a
And you can actually export.
comparison view here.
Yeah, and you can export a report
Yep.
on this as well.
Fully exportable.
Wow.
I'll just kind of go down to the bottom.
You know, all your traffic once is live is going to come from this board. So you know. We're all data geeks over here. Love the numbers.
Is there a target date for when it will go live?
So it could go live now, but we are trying to figure out where the best place to expose the public to it on our website. And so probably within the next week or so. I mean, we really just got to find a place to embed the link and create the frame, what I call the wireframe, that tells the story of what it does.
Great work, team.
Well done.
Very impressive.
And then, once again, if I could get our Madam Clerk to come up here and, so I don't run interference on the rest of the meeting by making a technological mistake here.
I got you.
You got me, thank you.
Are we here now?
We are there, and maximize, and you showed me how to do it, but you know I don't remember. But anyway,
That's okay.
let's go ahead.
All right.
So you may be wondering what's going on in terms of the update to our affordable housing plan, which is, again, a lot of words. As you are aware, back in the winter of this year, back in January, the town issued an RFP for consulting services to update the plan. We were unable to negotiate a mutually satisfactory contract with the consultant that we selected, and so we decided, staff decided to change courses and maybe refine the work and the approach that we would like to see here in Apex. Give it a little bit more teeth, make it a lot less sort of macro-oriented, big picture-oriented, but really what are the micro things that we want to get from this to some level of granular detail. And so in so doing, we developed what we hope to be a new and better scope of work, which will do basically two things. Assessment of existing conditions, which will include analyses of all four of the elements listed under bullet point 1, and then very simply, the development of a framework and strategy going forward. And of course, I'm not going to read everything on the slide, and I think it's included in your agenda packet. I'm seeing people turn the pages. The four elements of the existing conditions assessment would include, again, analysis of existing plans, of course, expanding on the work of the 2021 Affordable Housing Plan development process, plan progression, as you mentioned, to date, as well as other town plans with relevance to housing and plans developed by Wake County, the Wake County Housing Authority, and other partner groups. An analysis of local housing market groups, and I said I wasn't going to read, but I'm doing it. So here we would want the consultant to analyze the needs, including the gap of affordable housing for different sections of the population in Apex, including the ETJ, and also provide an analysis of how housing affordability impacts town growth going forward. An analysis of any housing barriers to development, whether they be regulatory or land use. And then last and certainly not least, an analysis of affordable housing programs in Apex operated by the towns, Wake County, nonprofit partners, Wake County Housing Authority, North Carolina Housing Finance Agency, and others to develop a clear picture of how the town's investment fits into the larger context of housing affordability services. There are some expected work products from the analysis of existing conditions, and they, of course, are included here. Anything that we would like for them to produce a summary that of existing conditions, of course, informed by data, but also public engagement. And so we'll have a fairly robust public engagement expectation to provide an analysis or a synthesis, if you will, of the factors that may be restricting housing choice, and of course, including but not limited to the following: public perception about affordable housing, gentrification and other trends in development, as well as demographic shifts, access to home ownership, including potential barriers to access to capital, and other factors.
Question.
Yes.
So you had mentioned that you could not come to terms with the last selected group. Is the plan to put out another RFP to fund another group or to do in-house?
We have.
We have.
You have.
It went out Friday.
Okay. Okay.
This may also, we would like for the consultant to work with the town to confirm a list of potential programs and strategies that align with the town's goals and the needs identified. And these may include financing the development and preservation of permanent affordable housing, funding for home ownership programs such as down payment assistance, of course, homeowner repair, as well as flexible mortgage products, funding for strategic land acquisition, strategies for the disposition or development of vacant town-owned and other publicly owned property.
Can I ask a quick question as I relate to the existing conditions, and I think it flows nicely into the strategy and framework development. The existing conditions, is this coming from a homeowner perspective, or is this coming from community perspective, or both?
It's coming from a range of perspectives, and that gets into what we're going to do in terms of community engagement or public engagement around the strategy development. So it will include, hardcore data. This is what the data says. It will also include the perspective, probably through focus groups and other ways to assess public, not opinion, but public perception of what we're trying to do here. And so a combination of both.
So again, I just want to clarify, public perception from the perception of potential home buyers and current homeowners?
A cross-section of the population here, a wide range. So not any specific targeted niche group, but opportunities for a range of stakeholders, which would include existing homeowners as well as those who may be renting here and want to buy. So it could include a range of
Okay, and then that sort of as that lies into, this is actually another one of my things I've been very loudly commenting on, is I think having public conversations around, so I'm glad that this is a part of the products that will be produced, having conversations around what it means to have affordable housing, and juxtaposing that to current, just as we were talking about what was some of the limiting factors, right? Connectivity and environmental resources, like understanding how those desires interplay with affordable housing. So I'm hoping that is included in this, but understanding, I will say, excited about this, but understanding that council has to make the really difficult decisions.
And we hope to bring to bear some things to consider for those conversations.
I appreciate that, wanting to just name that out loud.
And in all likelihood, you all will, much like we try to do with the data dashboard, also receive an invitation to participate in any other focus groups or public meetings and things of that nature. So we're looking for a real cross-section of comments to help inform where we go, because we know perception is a huge challenge, and especially as we look to how we fund this stuff going forward, taxpayer appetite for some things, we need to understand that before certain strategies might be recommended to council. So we'll need to hear from a wide variety of people.
I'm glad that we will be invited. I would also encourage you to extend the invitation to the other advisory boards. I'm thinking about planning, I'm thinking about EAB, just all the other citizen advisory boards that come in some contact with policies that are being considered as it relates to housing and development.
That's a great idea. And we can certainly put that on the our stakeholder list.
Again, trying to pull out the silos, right? EAB is very concerned, as they should be, as to environmental implications of development, but understanding how those environmental implications affect other decisions, I think, is really critical. And so having the voices in the room and ensuring there's not silos, I think is really important.
And of course, the framework and strategy development may also include changes to the town's regulatory environment to encourage development aligned with affordability goals, preservation of naturally occurring affordable housing, or NOAA, areas where programs and strategies may align with other town priorities, plans, including expanded transportation, access to parks, the town's comprehensive plan update, and the town's UDO and planning and development processes, as well as opportunities for participation with nonprofits, lenders, institutions, and public sector partners, including Wake County. And someone asked about timelines. So it turns out that we actually issued the RFP on Friday, or we published it on Friday. And we are expecting a 6 to 7 month sort of process here. And of course, the anticipated sort of activities in that process are listed here.
Is that November? I'm seeing November. So, okay. Which I think, again, aligns with if we did a update to incentive zoning now, by the time that this comes back around, we will have additional information. We'll have not only 2 years worth of data and changes, plus this report to even better inform the third revision of the incentive policies, I think.
Thank you. I'm glad you said that. Was my thinking exactly. So
if I can just finish here,
sure.
With final plan production in the May to June timeframe, to get that back for your review.
So I guess the main question I have is doing another affordable housing plan within 3.5 years of doing the original affordable housing plan, and I'm hearing all the things you're going to do, and a lot of them are exactly what was done previously. I admit that, public perception may change and so forth, but if I put the annual housing report together with the proposal to do an updated affordable housing plan, it's like, are we really putting the resources where we're going to get the most bang for the buck, where we're really going to be putting affordable homes out there, as opposed to talking about how we can strategize? And so, I mean, I just get impatient when we're going through a planning process once again. And I was part of the original planning process, and there was a lot of good material that was produced. We're still actually, I think we're still going through in terms of land acquisition and attracting developers to build the affordable housing. I think we're still going through that process. So I just, if there's something that's really missing from the original affordable housing plan, I can kind of see doing that and putting that as an addendum to the original affordable housing plan. But I don't understand why we're redoing it again, I guess.
I'm going to add to that. So I have had a similar question, but my question is sort of built on that, and that is, what is different in this version than what we had last time? Like, is there a list of what is what will be produced differently?
The value add.
Just so I can understand, right? Kind of where things stand. Because I have a similar concern, Phil. So
Lamont, let me start this
Okay, you
one,
can
because
start
we
that one.
started the
Sure.
process before you joined the team.
yeah.
So a couple of things. One, the work that was done on the current plan took place during COVID. And just as we saw the huge increase in housing cost here between last year and this year, we know a lot of the data and the dynamics in the community have changed since 2020 when the heart of the work was done. So recognizing the change in the landscape necessitated updating where we are. So that gets into the current conditions situation. In addition to that, as I have reviewed the overarching elements of the current plan, we are well into the 2 to 5 year time frame, and there are a number of items in that immediate and that intermediate range that we have already touched on. Yes, there are still some things, in particular affordable home ownership, that we still need to do more work on, and of course we've talked about that a little bit already, but there have been a number of the things that have been included in both the immediate and the near-term time frame that we have actually been working on and have kind of dipped our toes into the long-range ones, which are 5 to 10 years. So because we know there's been a change in the landscape and we have actually been making progress on a number of the items, this is actually looked at as an update to the plan, not a whole new replacement plan. So we're still working on items that are in the current plan and will continue to leverage those, but how has the landscape shifted such that we might take a slightly different approach to some of the other things that are in the current plan because the landscape has changed. So that was the logic behind wanting to do an update. So again, it's not a full-fledged replacement plan as much as recognizing how far we've come, where do we need to pivot, and what can we leverage going forward.
So December last year, we had the UNC School of Government Development Finance Initiative come and basically redo the housing needs assessment. And they did a good job. But what I realized was we're losing ground. You know, whereas maybe 3-4 years ago, there were 12% of the people that worked in Apex that were actually able to live in Apex. Now it's like 7%. So we're going, so I guess it's just a matter, if we're going to be, as a body here, if we're going to be giving advice on policy and funding and so forth, I'm just wondering what the right balance is of devoting resources to better implementing the things like the Affordable Housing Incentive Zoning Policy or Apex Cares or whatever, versus putting resources towards redoing a housing needs assessment and re-strategizing and so forth. It's like, what's the right balance here? You know, and I'm not sure what that is, but I just want to make sure that we're doing all we can to get those houses on the ground here in Apex.
And
Go ahead. Do we have an idea of what you think this plan is going to cost?
We don't.
We have a budget.
We have a budget.
Set aside in this year's council-approved budget.
Perfect.
Yeah, so we do have money set aside.
Okay.
And of course, our goal is to negotiate to come in at that budget or below.
Yeah, just as giving my 2 cents here, it's not uncommon in the nonprofit world to redo a strategic plan every 3 to 5 years. So, and I do get that COVID was a very different time than it is now in the housing market. So, I mean, I just can understand that you're analyzing what you have done and then updating what you need to do. So.
So does the budget for the update come from the Affordable Housing Fund? Comes from the general operating budget?
No, let me take that back. It will come from the fund.
Okay, so we're basically prioritizing funds within the Affordable Housing Fund to go to updating a plan versus doing something else with it that
No, it's
Mike?
not an either or. I mean, as development
There's a limited
opportunities,
budget. I mean,
well, but as development opportunities and investment opportunities present themselves, we stand ready to make those necessary investments to the extent our budget allows. But right now, that has been approved for us because the work is necessary. I mean, we're operating on, you know, some older data brought to bear at a time when the world was different, and the world is vastly different today than it was when that plan was created.
but DFI did an update in December of last year. What am I missing here? What?
While they may have done a housing needs assessment from their lens with a very specific scope that we asked them to do for us, this is building out far more than what we asked DFI to do. That was a very different scope of work for a very different outcome. But here, where we're looking at the various barriers and programs and policies, especially on the programs and policies, because that's where we're likely to get the most bang for our buck in terms of what are those policies that maybe the planning board can adopt in terms of changes to the UDO. Then what are the policies that council may enact that might help us? What are some of the things that maybe we need to go to the General Assembly on to get permission to do that could help us in this work? So what DFI did for us is very different than what we're looking to achieve through this update to the housing plan.
I'm gonna say the Marla, thank you. I'm gonna say the part where I'm challenged sitting here. I'm from Fayetteville, North Carolina, the home of Fort Bragg, Fort Liberty.
Right.
And when I was a senior in high school, a report came out that said teenage pregnancy is higher around military bases. Duh. Of course it is. You have a lot of young men and a surplus, and of course it is. That is not something that teenage Tina could not have told you from the get-go. I think, and while I was really excited about, like, yes, let's do this and let's do these other things, I think my real concern, not that I don't think that it needs to be updated, I do think resources are finite, right? Resources are finite, and so we are diverting funds that could be used towards development, no matter which way we cut it. But the reality is I am begging council to make challenging decisions. We have data before us. We absolutely need an update. I don't know whether that update comes now or we're in an election year. We're gonna kick off at the end of an election cycle. Things are about to change drastically in one direction or another, with another local election coming shortly thereafter. I am just wondering how all of these things play and how we can encourage actual conversation to happen. I mean, we literally just sat and I was like, wait, we have data here that we can be acting on. And council needs to be having conversations about what all of these mean that I haven't seen happen. There's so much more that can happen without this piece first that we can continually be acting on. So I'm wondering a little bit if I want this to happen. I absolutely agree those COVID numbers are different. And I think there's so much information we can be acting on now and so many changes we can change now that this may be more beneficial in, say, 3 to 5 years, not at this 3 years. We're still so much in the infancy where some of the short-term things have happened. We're still working on some of the long-term things, but are we gonna reset when we don't even have our grounding about us? I haven't heard council come out and have the challenging conversations around the varying priorities that we have. And those are real, they're not politically fun. Like, let's just name that. Nobody wants to say we don't want environmental protections over affordable housing. Nobody wants to say that, but we have to have those conversations. Our building partners, our development partners are telling us, I can't put in solar panels and build multiple family homes. I can't do it. So we need to actually have those conversations. There are things we can do now, I think, to change the trajectory that then better informs this happening in like 3 to 5 years.
You know, I think that the whole building process is complicated, and there's a lot of intervening priorities. I mean, earlier we heard the example of, do we want affordable housing or do we want connectivity? And then another one is, do we want affordable housing or do we want, you know, environmentally friendly situations? And so it's so difficult to look at this one segment and say, why isn't it happening? I do think one of the things that was mentioned is this whole, you know, I think regulatory barriers was kind of one of the elements that was part of this discussion, is, you know, something we should consider going forward. And I think probably hand in hand with that is just kind of intervening priorities. We know that affordability is a high priority, but it's not the only priority. And so I think the affordability problem is not unique to Apex. It's not unique to North Carolina. And it's really the result of about 15 years of not being able to keep up with a growing demand. I mean, housing production all around here has gone up and it's gone down and it's trying to come back up. But population has just been a constant up. And so, you know, one of the things that never really, I think, that I'm not hearing much is when supply and demand are out of balance, the only way you fix it is to fix one or the other. I don't think we're going to be able to fix the demand problem. We can't convince people they don't need a place to live. And so how do we fix the supply problem? And I don't hear a lot about that in any of this. How are we fixing the supply problem? And if we can't fix the supply problem, we're never going to catch up. We're always just going to be saying, why aren't we getting anything done?
And the hard part of that is, if you are on any forums within Apex, every other post is all about the balancing the needs of transportation and all these extra
the other priorities.
townhome communities that are popping up everywhere, all over the place, that are driving us nuts. So, you know, it's the NIMBYism. It's the nobody else. I'm here, therefore nobody else can be. And it is it's a frustrating mindset when we know exactly what you're talking about. We know that there is less supply than there is demand. But that's true across the board, whether you actually want to buy a house or if you want to rent an apartment, right?
No, that's true across the board. Absolutely.
Yeah, across the board, all types of housing.
There's not a type of housing we don't need more of.
Right, exactly, exactly. So, yeah, I mean, my biggest priority has always been built affordable housing in whatever form that takes, because we do need all those different types of supplies. We need the single family home, we need the townhome, we need the apartment, we need all the duplexes and triplexes and quadplexes, any housing type that we can possibly get on the ground to support the people that are trying to be here. So, you know, my priority would be however we can more quickly get that done, you know, and whether that means switching focus and tackling the incentive zoning policy first before we do an update. I don't know. That's something that we need to have a conversation about. But that is something that is very real, that a lot of people that are complaining about, you know, waiting 30 seconds more at their traffic light aren't taking into account. So.
Okay. If there are no other questions, I have a personal incentive for moving us along because I'm the next presenter.
So if we can get the Madam Clerk to come and transition us.
I am turning the chair over to the vice chair while I go and
Be warned. Be warned.
Don't let power go to your
Got
head.
that gavel.
Right? Just kidding. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lamont, for your presentation.
Yes.
Thank you, Lamont.
Lamont.
Yes.
We're a tough group, Lamont. Sorry.
We are. Has nothing to do with you.
Poor guy.
We did this all the time.
Okay, so I want to welcome the mayor to the audience and all the others that are here. They're hanging in here with all this detailed discussion. I'm going to get into inclusionary zoning, and my presentation is going to be based on a book that I left up by my place there, but there's a small book thank you, Paul, by Professors Mulligan and Joyce. And when I was looking around for information on and researching inclusionary zoning in North Carolina, I found the book and I found it very interesting. The authors are lawyers, so they bring a legal perspective, and I thought that was valuable. And I think it might be helpful to the Housing Advisory Board and the staff as we look at maybe revising the affordable housing incentive policy we have. So I really focused on what aspects of inclusionary zoning might be permissible in Apex. I did ask Professor Joyce to review the presentation. When I first put it together, it was a much longer presentation. I condensed it down. And he told me, he said there have been, the book, by the way, was published in 2010. So it's 14 years old. And it's probably more than that because they wrote it, obviously, before it was published. But he said that there have been some recent legal opinions with a narrower view of local authority regarding zoning, but not specifically for inclusionary zoning. So that has not really been tested in the courts. So with that, let's see how there we go. So this is an outline of the questions I'm going to be covering. What is inclusionary zoning? Is it permitted in North Carolina? What types of inclusionary zoning exist here? The legal authority for doing it? Why is a housing needs assessment needed? And that's one thing that I learned as I went through the book. What are the prime conditions for inclusionary zoning, and what are the possible developer incentives? That last part we may not need to go through, because I think when we were doing the incentive zoning policy, we kind of beat that to death. So simply put, inclusionary zoning, actually in the book, it defines it from three different perspectives. One is from the town regulation perspective, one is from a developer builder perspective, and one from the benefit to the town's residents and workers. So the regulatory approach, inclusionary zoning is a regulatory approach to rely on the private market to help increase the supply of affordable homes. From the developer perspective, it encourages developers to set aside homes affordable to households of lower incomes. I think we pretty much know this. But then the thing that I want to focus on is it's supposed to ensure that new residential developments contain housing which reflects the income ranges of persons living and working in the community. And I think I mentioned before that we're now at a point, as of the December DFI housing needs assessment, where 7% of the people who work in Apex actually live in Apex. And to me, that's an indication that might be a problem. Oop. Pushed the wrong button. There we go. So what's the legal context in North Carolina? As we know, in North Carolina, local governments must first possess legal authority that they get from the General Assembly to enact anything, including an inclusionary zoning ordinance.
And that's the United States Senate, just for clarification for anybody who's watching later.
I'm sorry?
That's the United States Senate.
All right.
Oh, that picture?
Yeah. Not the General Assembly, just
okay.
authority rests in the General Assembly.
Be a deliberative body. Thank you for pointing that out. So municipalities here in North Carolina may only exert powers either expressly granted or permissibly implied from statutory grants of authority. That's very legalistic. That I pulled directly from the book. So what they say is in North Carolina there is no express prohibition of inclusionary zoning, And also, there's no express statewide authority for inclusionary zoning. There is permission authority in particular places. North Carolina law permits local authority to be implied from other grants of power, and so there are a number of statutory grants of authority to regulate land use that arguably contain implied authority to enact inclusionary zoning. For example, zoning power authorizes local governments, quote, for the purpose of health, safety, morals, and general welfare, to regulate and restrict the height, number of stories, and size of buildings and other structures, the density of population, and the location and use of buildings, structures, and lands. And then there's another quote in there, well, there's another statement in there that there is a long-standing rule of case law that indicates that zoning regulations, as long as they are reasonable, are presumed to be valid in North Carolina, and housing affordability has long been an assumed component of zoning. So, following so far? Okay. So now being more specific about the inclusionary zoning ordinance, the findings section of an ordinance, that's the kind of the upfront introduction section, might quote facts from a housing needs assessment, such as the housing needs assessment in APEX's 2021 Affordable Housing Plan, or in the UNC School of Government, DFI's 2023 updated housing needs assessment for APEX. They actually have sample finding sections from the towns of Chapel Hill and Manteo in the book, and they're good. They're good examples. Invoking the legal authority serves the legal purpose. In other words, if you if you reference a housing needs assessment and say this is why it's needed, then that's the legal authority where local governments possess the regulatory authority to act. However, some see implied inclusionary zoning power in zoning, subdivision, and housing authority grants of authority. So this is one of these things where it's an implied, it's a permissible use. So what are types of inclusionary zoning that exist right now in North Carolina? And these are primarily in the production provision part, chapter 3 of this particular book. And it starts out by saying that the engine of an affordable housing ordinance consists of its production provisions, and the provisions control the type and quantity of affordable housing to be produced. The type really refers to the level of compulsion, and the percent is self-explanatory. So on the one end of the spectrum, we have mandatory requirements. That's the strong end of the spectrum. On the other end, we have the voluntary or optional approach with incentives. That tends to be a little weaker. And then, as I mentioned before, the conditional requirements, under that situation, the expectation is that the applicants for conditional zoning changes will incorporate affordable housing proposals in the development and rezoning proposal that they submit to the planning board and town council. Under North Carolina law, any conditions on site-specific standards imposed, quote, must address the impacts reasonably expected to be generated by the development. For example, making reference to a housing needs assessment that identifies an undersupply of affordable housing in the community and articulates how further market rate development would exacerbate that undersupply would be justification. So the examples that are here, Davidson has a mandatory inclusionary zoning ordinance, 12.5%. And it does make a difference what AMI levels are addressed there. I didn't get into that. Of course, Apex has the voluntary incentive zoning policy. And then Chapel Hill has a 2000 year 2000 resolution with a conditional program for rezoning. So because there have been some references to the housing needs assessment, the housing needs assessment, number one, provides data for the policymaking process, and number two, it gives the legal justification for implementing inclusionary zoning. And so the types of things that can be included in the housing needs assessment, I think part of this was in the initial affordable housing plan, maybe not all of it, but the housing gaps, that looks at the number of local workers by income and compares them to the number of housing units available for rent or purchase at prices affordable to those incomes. So that's really the matching of supply and demand. Also looking at forecasts of housing and employment, so that we're looking out and aiming towards a future goal rather than just the current goal, because it typically takes 3 to 5 years to actually, get the affordable housing or any housing through the pipeline. And then there's a linkage between the planned residential and commercial development and a corresponding increase in the demand for affordable homes for service workers. That's the linkage between the worker part and the housing need part. Barriers to affordability can include large lot sizes, extensive setbacks, and low density limits. I don't know that we have those problems here in Apex, honestly. Okay. So what are the prime conditions for inclusionary zoning that were pointed out in the book? The main thing is that it's most effective, most productive in strong housing markets. If there's greater demand for new homes, then assuming you have effective inclusionary zoning, then that brings more affordable homes along as well. More demand can also make the incentives more effective. It's more successful in areas with developable land, and I'm going to put a footnote on that in a second. And there are highest returns from inclusionary zoning if the area is not built out, and one could debate whether Apex is built out or not. We're developing other parts, especially out west. So I want to look at this statement that they're more successful in areas with developable land, that is inclusionary zoning. It doesn't say vacant land. It says developable land, which I think can include underutilized properties such as office buildings, strip malls, underutilized parks, and even land and buildings that are owned by faith communities. There is land out there, and it is it's not vacant, but I think it is developable. And in the interest of time, unless people want me to go through all the different density bonuses and other fee bonuses and so forth, I'm going to skip this part. If you have any questions on it, let me know. Any questions on the rest of the presentation? And by the way, if you would like me to order you a copy of the book so that you can take a look at it, and I may have looked at it with a certain bias, let me know, and I'll be glad to order some books for any member of the board or the staff.
Staff has a copy, thank you.
Okay, good.
Bill, so are you suggesting that this board take on a review of some form of inclusionary? Is that what you're suggesting by this presentation? Or?
Okay, so one thing I forgot to mention at the beginning was, Lamont made the presentation, last quarter about the different types of inclusionary zoning or affordable housing and so forth. This was meant to augment what he did from a legal perspective. It's background information in terms of what's the breadth of what we could consider. So I guess the answer to your question is yes, it is trying to give a little bit more background.
And then I have a question. So Commissioner Killingsworth, you were maybe I shouldn't talk. No, I'm just kidding.
You got the chairmanship.
I know, right? I just power went to my head. Sorry, it really didn't. I do this all the time anyway. So yes, I know. Earlier you mentioned that that you think, or I don't remember your exact terms, but basically that you think that the developments that we looked at were conditional of some sort, right? So I guess my question or thought is, how do you think that is different than, you know, what Phil just sort of presented, and or do you think the conditional approval is strong enough? Or I don't know how to ask that question, right? Like, is it enough? Are we pushing that boundary enough, or are we just saying, okay, you offered us 2 and we'll conditionally approve it? I just want to understand, since I'm not on the council and I don't live in Apex.
So the way that I view this is anything that is above and beyond requirements of the UDO. If the developer voluntarily says, yes, I will do these things, that is a conditional zoning.
Okay.
Okay, so that means if they go above and beyond and put a piece of art on their property.
Sure.
If they do any of the EAB recommendations, all those are conditional zoning approvals with the developer saying, I'm doing this based on I'm voluntarily saying yes to these things. That is different than mandatory. Mandatory is something we do not have authority for, and I think our town attorney would have a heart attack if we tried to do that without expressed General Assembly authority to do so.
Sure.
And with the current General Assembly, you're not going to get that.
No.
For sure. For sure.
Right.
Did we know?
Exactly. It would not happen with the current makeup of the General Assembly, and they haven't approved anything like that for a very long time anyway.
Yeah.
As far as our volunteer, we're already doing the voluntary, and the idea is that no one has taken advantage of it for whatever reason. Either they didn't think the incentives were good enough for them to provide that amount, or the council hasn't pushed hard enough. You know, it could be argued both things are happening at the same time. I would say that, you know, the whole reason why we have any period is because of the conditional zoning that developers have voluntarily given affordable housing to the people of this town.
That's helpful.
I would add to that. I think that I think council's in that, again, the attorney is what the attorney is not going to allow them to do, right? They're not going to demand. And so I think council often sits in this place where they could ask for more, but don't always, because of how that can be perceived. So I will say in the planning board, I will ask for more. I'm just a volunteer. So I will ask for more. And oftentimes when I ask, they are receptive. And so I do often use those conversations that we're having in planning board to encourage. Now, it doesn't always get passed. It doesn't always get passed out of planning board, and then it doesn't always get passed down to council. But I do try to, because it is conditional, and if I don't ask, they can't say yes or no, right? And let's be clear, no one is going to, including developers, are not going to voluntarily necessarily do something. So I do think it requires that ask. And so I think it's recognizing that we have what we have because there have been asks. I think there could be more asks. That's Tina Sherman personally saying that. And I also recognize the challenge that the council is in doing that, which is where I think the inclusionary zoning does come in, because then it would be, right? Then it would be a part of the UDO, it would be a part of, and that's where it could come in. So that to balance a little bit of what Audra said. I think one of my questions, Phil, to you in this presentation was, thank you for the book. I'm definitely going to check it out because I'm that person. However, as someone who works down on Jones Street occasionally from a completely different angle, I'm wondering if you've had conversations with folks who are like, I mean, we've named that the current General Assembly is not there. Also, I'm going to say they're not there yet. They may never be there, but you know, there are challenges in housing markets across the state, and there are not challenges in other parts of the state. So I do wonder if there is any conversations that are happening with folks who are regularly down on Jones Street talking about these issues.
I would say that, or from my experience working on Jones Street and traveling throughout the state as well, it's on everybody's mind. All the legislators, it doesn't matter if they have a D or R beside them, the housing, rural and urban it's a huge thing that's on everybody's mind. And I think the electorate, whoever's voting, are telling them that too.
Okay.
So I don't think it's it's rural folks and we don't they don't have that issue. Actually, there's rural housing is really rough right now because there is no development going out and
Right.
there's not. There's a whole list of items I can get to on why that's the case, but
Yeah, no, thank you
from
for
my
that.
experience.
So I almost wonder if some of these conversations should be happening more there. And council should be involved in that.
Any other
Yeah, does the
comments,
book
questions?
does the book address economics of how this works rather than the legal side? Because I mean, there seems to be this presupposition that it will be economically possible for developers to do this without great financial hardship.
Right.
So does the book address that?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
No. It's a good point. That's.
I think there's often this perception that the profit margins for builders and developers is kind of like a jewelry store markup. My forgiveness to jewelry store owners. But
What is it, a jewelry store? Tell me more.
what is this thing? But from a lot of the things I've read, and that's why I'm at least with the incentive zoning, it's kind of like the private developers putting something in, but then the town's putting something in too through the incentives, and that that without that kind of public-private participation in it, that what ends up happening is everything that's not those 5 or 10% of the houses that are built less expensively, the price goes up on everything else to offset those. And so except for the small number of homes that kind of win the housing lottery, everybody else pays the price, then those become comps for the neighborhood next door. So from a community-wide perspective, the economics of it don't play out in the long term. And so, yeah, I'd be interested to know more about that.
Housing is really hard.
Yeah, yeah,
Really hard.
Yeah.
Patricia, I think you had a.
Do you know if Davison, has it been challenged at all?
That's what I was wondering.
I'm curious about that too.
Okay.
I don't think.
Because I think the way they do it in Chapel Hill is that it is a condition, not if you want to, but if you're going to get rezoning, you are going to put this in,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so
They've
it's,
been doing that since like the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
That
Yeah.
preceded a lot of the stuff
But I
now.
think
and
it
have
does
just
create-
decided, forget it, we're doing it.
I think it does create those, they're supposed to segment within the community, but it segregates. It's not community building. It is a record scratch. It is, there's this and there's this. And to the Chapel Hill market is bearing out what you're talking about in terms of economics, where the more expensive houses get more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this group of housing where there's not really any long-term affordability there either on those units.
Something else interesting, I just saw this about 3 weeks ago. An article came out from Zillow talking about that there are certain markets in the country where existing home prices per square foot have actually gotten more than new homes. Because there's always what I always call the new home premium, right? It's like a new car premium.
Is that here?
We're one of them.
Yep, I knew it.
We're one of them in the country where existing homes prices are more per square foot than the new homes,
Yep.
which tells you the problem isn't just the cost of construction.
Right.
it's the dirt.
Yeah, it really starts with the dirt.
Phil, I want to probably, at least in the top 5 leading scholars nationally on this topic is Emily Hamilton. Lives in DC, publishes articles a lot, does fantastic, thorough research, and I'll send that over to you.
Okay.
She has gone into studying inclusionary zoning across the country. From everybody mentions it from Montgomery County, Maryland, as a best practice. You'll hear everybody quote that. But she's gone in and said, has this done what it's intended to do? The research has shown that it doesn't. So just like as Paul mentioned, or Elena mentioned, the Chapel Hill. If Chapel Hill has this, then why are they one of the most expensive communities in the Triangle to live in? So that's one thing. It also, this book, but all her research, along with a team of research that she has, this book doesn't take into account the unintended consequences where her research, or the research that has been done, not just by her, but others as well. Salim Firth is another one. Nolan Gray is another one as well. All those 3 are the top scholars in here. Anyway, they also published an article, I think within the last week, of listing specific items that nationwide, like here are some best practices where we've seen, where it's helped with affordability, accessibility of homes as well. And it's a pretty big document of saying here's what local governments can really dive into and change it. And it's some of the unsexy things, parking minimums and other things as well. But I mean, these little unsexy things also can add up.
Yeah.
And I think that's the point too. I'll email you over that.
Okay, good.
Jacob, would you mind sending the info to the clerk, and then he can get it out to everybody here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, good idea. Yep.
That's awesome.
Okay, we're running out of time here. The other thing that I wanted to do was bring some information about the visit that recently took place to the Southwood Mobile Home Park redevelopment. Patricia was along on that. This is August 14th, so less than a month ago. There were 16 representatives from Habitat Wake, the town of Apex, and Wake County Housing Department, along with a couple local advocates like myself. We visited Habitat for Humanity of Greater Charlottesville to tour a couple of their redeveloped mobile home parks. The one that is the big one is the Southwood Mobile Home Park, and I put together a briefing on what we learned. So if you look at, yeah, you got it, these guys here. This is not a formal presentation, this is what I call a briefing. So they purchased, this affiliate up in Charlottesville, Virginia, purchased a manufactured home community in the early 2000s. It's a small one, 16 families, a little over 3 acres, that was near the downtown. They took a bit of a leap of faith to buy the park, promise no evictions, and redevelop it. The big thing that they'd started out with was to raise $1 million down payment. They got $400,000 from a private donor that really kicked that off. One of the keys that they found was that they sold some of the lots to market rate builders to pay for the redevelopment, to pay for infrastructure and so forth. And that not only does that, but it also then makes it a mixed income community. And the initial step that they took was just to, mobile home parks sometimes are not in great, repair. So they did a bunch of repair to the infrastructure, and they basically built trust with the residents, and they engaged the residents in some of the redevelopment decisions, which was key. Then it happened that the owner of a larger manufactured home community went on a tour of the smaller mobile home park after it had been redeveloped, and came to Habitat and said, can you do the same thing on my larger manufactured home community? The larger one was 100 acres with about 350 mobile homes, 1,500 residents, so way bigger than the original one. And it was not within this city boundary. It was just outside in the county. They purchased that in 2007 for $7 million. And the way I understand it, and Patricia, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, I think they did it with a seller-financed interest-only loan. So the woman that was the owner of the park basically sold it to them, and the debt was, they basically, it was like an annuity, right? It gave her money to live on for the rest of her life, and passed the wealth along to her family members as well. So in this case, it was mostly Spanish-speaking households, which sounds familiar to what mobile home parks look like around here. Some of them had essential jobs in the community. Some of them had their own businesses, and some of them had both in order to get ahead. It did require some changes in the Habitat affiliate. They really had a transition from building new homes to developing existing communities. They went from building 1 or 2 new single-family detached homes a year to building about 25 or so homes each year in 17 different styles. This is for the larger mobile home park, from 2-bedroom condos to single-family detached homes. And they empowered the residents to design what their new neighborhoods would look like. And basically, the affiliate and the residents kind of learned what they were doing as they went along. They actually met weekly for about 3 years to put together the plan. And maybe now is a good time to just pull that out of the pile. This is, you should have a copy of this. This is kind of the Monopoly Board plan that, you're familiar with charrettes and workshops and so forth. And it was not only the residents, but also a couple architects and community organizers and engineers and so forth that said, okay, given the topography here and so forth, this is what they came up with in that 3-year period. And on the big diagram is what they came up with, and then the artist's conception is down here in the lower left. One of the things that well, let me say that they had to start by responding to what the residents' needs were, what their requests were. So they basically brought in trucks to haul out debris. If you're not familiar with mobile home parks, there sometimes is an accumulation of trash, let's call it as it is, and so they had some like 50 trucks full of stuff that they pulled out. So that was one thing. The other thing they did was that they hosted a back-to-school night that they had 1,000 of the 1,500 people come to, where I presume they gave out school supplies and so forth. They also hired bilingual community organizers to meet with the residents. They actually trained the residents to do not only development, but some of the planning and some of the financial analysis. And I guess if you run your own business, you kind of know some of the financial, you have some of those skills. And then the key to all this that I was getting at before was they were able to acquire 20 acres on the edge of the existing mobile home park, which was where they then put the initial Village 1 and Village 2. And so actually, let's see, do you have this one? Yes.
This.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes. Yeah. So if you look at this colorful one here, you see the little tab on the left-hand side? That was the 20 acres that they acquired, so that then they could build the homes there and then move people from where I think they moved people from villages 3A and 3B into 1 and 2, and then now they're going to start redeveloping villages 3A and 3B. It's a complex process, but they showed that it could be done. See what else I have here.
And they're building actual homes to then put like the
Yes,
the
yes.
mobile homes go away.
Yes.
And these, I just want to make sure
Yes,
that's
yes,
clear.
right. And
Yeah.
it's everything that, I mean, Habitat in this case is
Sure.
actually building some apartments in order to
Sure.
respond to the, income level of the
Cool.
household, as well as some detached homes. But the interesting thing is, if you look at this picture here, the yellow homes are the market rate homes. And so I think in Village 1, there is something like 31 market rate homes and 49 Habitat homes. So it is truly a mixed village, a mixed community, with a whole bunch of different styles of the Habitat home. So I think it's pretty exciting in terms of what they stepped out in faith and were able to do with the property that they got. And what we heard when we went there a couple weeks ago was that there is another mobile home park that again came to Habitat and said, "Can you do for our mobile home park what you did for the first two?" And they're figuring out the financing of that right now.
I've seen a similar project in Detroit.
Okay. Okay.
That's similar, not the same, but similar. But the idea of resident engagement is
That was
really the key to.
That was the key. Yeah. Yeah, and there are things like playgrounds in here and a small soccer field, and they're actually right on the edge of a really nice park, and so I'm sure that helped sell the market rate developers and the buyers of the market rate homes, because we went to the model home that's circled here someplace, right across the street from the model Habitat home. They're selling market rate detached homes for like $500,000 to $600,000, right in the midst of the community. So it can work if you have the right environment, is what I'm saying. Yeah.
We're the market rate builder in Weaver's Grove in Chapel Hill.
Okay.
So we're building alongside Habitat.
Yeah.
Orange County.
Okay.
And those homes are $500,000.
Yep. Okay.
We're building.
Mm-hmm. So it's a very similar thing, except it didn't start as a mobile
not a
home park, but
redevelopment,
the
no.
idea is the
It's a-
same in terms of mixed income.
Exactly, and I think the property was over 20 years old before that, to get this project to where it is today. It took a very long time.
Yeah.
But yeah, we love it. It's a smaller funnel of people who are in for that adventure,
Right.
for the buyers. It works well in places where people just have to live, or want to live, no matter what. So Chapel Hill has a captive audience. Apex has a captive audience of people who are just, I'm going to live in Apex, and that opens opportunities.
Triangle has a captive audience.
Totally,
Yeah.
totally. But even our submarket, I think Apex is a compelling place where something like this could be successful.
Okay.
Agreed.
I think that's enough for now. We're running out of time. I will send around my chair comments so as not to keep people any longer, but anything else that we need to bring to the table here?
There seemed to be some uncertainty and some interest on the timeline of when we might reevaluate our housing incentives. How did we settle on that? Or did we?
I don't think we did.
I don't think we did.
I think we had to look to Marla to a certain extent, Director Newman, in terms of what's possible with the staff and so forth. But I agree with others that said, I think given the results that we've had so far, it's clear that the incentive zoning policy is not really working as well as we thought it might. And, Paul, you were kind of one of the ones that was saying, well, be careful. And so I think now it's incumbent on us to figure out how to modify it to make it a little bit more effective. So Marla, I can talk to you about that. We can see what we can come up with. I know at this point your desire is to wait until sometime later next year to do it. If we can do anything now, even to put something together for December, that's what I would prefer. But if there's some help that the board members could provide, then we're up for that as well. Okay.
All right.
Bill, can I say something?
Yes.
A few members appointment terms are coming up in October.
Uh-huh.
So at the next meeting, we'll be having discussions on that and bringing nominations to the mayor and council.
Okay.
Do we know whose terms are up?
Everyone whose terms weren't up before.
I just don't remember.
You're up. I'm up.
I think I'm up.
You're up. Yes, so it's Bill
Molly's
Wood,
up.
I think I'm up.
And Paul.
Patricia.
No, I
and
just-
Paul's
Paul
up. You
just
just
got-
you just
I just
went
got
over.
revoted.
So
Yeah.
Patricia's actually
Oh, and
serving
Patricia,
a partial
yeah.
term,
Oh, right.
so
Yeah.
she will be up for reappointment.
Yeah.
You just got started and you're already up for.
And Martha. as
That's
well.
okay.
Yeah.
So me, Phil, Martha,
meeting.
and Patricia.
That's correct.
Thank. Cool.
The other thing I wanted to mention is that in our rules of procedure, it actually says that we meet upstairs in the third floor training room. And I have had a few discussions with Red about this, and I feel like maybe communication is a little bit better if we can see each other face to face as opposed to along the line here. I've had discussions with Alan as well, our town clerk. There may be difficulties in going back upstairs, but I would at least like to explore that, because I would like to have us communicate as effectively as possible, and this does not necessarily lend it. This is great for when you have an audience and you want to see what the audience reaction is, and you're presenting to the audience, but we generally don't. This is probably the biggest audience we've ever had.
And thank you, by the way.
Isn't this recorded or video?
It is. We're live streamed
Okay.
and recorded.
Is that why?
That's the primary reason, and this is the public meeting space. Upstairs is our training room. And so this is the place where the public is told that if they wanted to come and participate, they would come to council chambers.
There is provision, there can be provision for public joining us upstairs as well. And it also can be live streamed upstairs. I mean, it may not be quite as comfortable for the AV folks, but it is possible.
Right. And I'm going to ultimately defer to the clerk, but I also know that this is being held consistent with all of the other advisory boards and commissions and the like. So just as part of the protocol of how our public meetings are held here in the town of Apex, that's why it's here like it is. And I'll defer to Mr. Coleman.
I thought I was going to get out of one without having to speak. Yes, so thank you, Marla. That is correct. This is the public meeting space, and so we have tried to transition a lot of our advisory boards into this space. As some of you may have seen, we are undergoing renovations in Town Hall, and so space is limited. And so anytime that we can defer an advisory board meeting to the chamber, it creates consistency, but also it creates a better way for the public to engage. It doesn't mean that they can't engage on the third floor, certainly, and the third floor is live streamed. Just like it is in here. This space is a little bit easier from a live streaming perspective because the cameras are able to zoom in on who's actually speaking. So in terms of a transcriptionist standpoint and collecting meeting minutes, it's easier in this space, but certainly we'll defer to the group.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of planning the meetings for next year, it might be possible to go back upstairs.
Yes, if that's the pleasure of this board.
Okay. So here's the other twist in that. The other thing I'd like to have the board think about is the possibility of, instead of meeting quarterly, meet bi-monthly, meet every other month. Because I think we have a lot to accomplish. I mean, we ran out of time today, basically. So think about that. If that sounds like something, and I know we're all volunteers, so it's, we're going to be imposing on people's time a little bit more. But if we can justify that in terms of the accomplishments that we're making, it's two extra meetings a year, bi-monthly. But let me know what your thoughts are on that, if you would.
How do people feel about that?
So, I mean, my preference is going to be what can staff accomplish in that period of time. And if they're not able to get done what they need to get done to present to us, then it's kind of a moot point, right? So that would be my comment to the amount of meetings that we have.
Yeah.
And what we have.
No, I recognize that.
And I also understand your desire to get as much done as possible. And, in understanding that piece of it, you can only do so much per person, period. So I would consider that to be a limiting point. As far as where we meet, honestly, it doesn't matter to me where we meet. I mean, I feel like we had a really good conversation today. Everybody got their point across and felt comfortable about that. This is a more public space, so people would feel more comfortable coming in and being here compared to being upstairs. So I would say that that's something to think about. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's my
I
thought.
gotta agree with the councilwoman. If we're gonna talk about the frequency of meetings, I look at this, the only vote we really had at this meeting should have been the minutes, and we didn't even do that, so I don't even know what would we do with an extra couple meetings, other than talk. So I don't see any value yet of by every other month, I guess is what you're saying.
So the other part of it is, I actually looked up in the Affordable Housing Plan what the responsibilities were to be for the Housing Advisory Board. And there's some responsibilities that we haven't really been too involved in. It's like providing the town council with policy and funding recommendations. It's something like that. We haven't really been doing a whole lot of that, and I would like to do more of that, honestly.
We have in a way.
In a way, yes, but like in terms of how much money is allocated from the property tax to the housing, the Affordable Housing Fund, and how is that used? I mean, I don't really feel like we're effective in terms of, providing priorities to the town council.
I will say on that point, it is much more difficult for the Housing Advisory Board to make that type of recommendation because land flips so quickly. If land comes available, there needs to be a decision made like that, and it's not possible to go to a board back to council for council then to make a decision.
On land acquisition, I totally agree with that. But then if you're looking at, like down payment assistance versus Apex Cares versus incentives and so forth, maybe that's an area where we could provide some. Otherwise, then, I'm at a loss for what we're doing.
Well, I mean, I also think too that staff has a better perspective when it comes to funding opportunities like that because they're the ones that work with like Rebuilding Together, the Triangle, so they understand that, yes, we allocated $26,000, but they actually needed 40. So they're the ones who made the recommendation that we increase that in the first place. They're at a better perspective than we are in terms of those types of things.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I feel like in some ways, yes, we could make some recommendations, but some of them are not going to be timely enough, and others are going to be completely up to discretion of the council anyway. So, and that, when we get into town budget negotiations and stuff like that, sometimes it is a lot of give and take.
You say.
So.
Well, the example you used of the Environmental Advisory Board doing almost like a checklist of added or not added, that's something that I would like to look into a little bit further. And I think the board members could look into that as well as the staff, maybe in conjunction with the staff.
Yeah, I think that is something that if we could add that as part of the planning process, that we could get a lot of benefit out of that and help us make better recommendations as a board.
Yeah, I agree.
I will say this is my aside, and that is I don't feel like the HAB is providing a benefit, for lack of a better word. I mean, we're like you said, Jacob, we had nothing to really talk about that's official, right, and decide on. So we got to kind of reflect on what is our role, right? I mean, I'm going to be honest. I don't want to just keep showing up here and just having conversations with all you guys. I love you guys, but
we can do this over a beer.
Yeah, I can do this after work, and we can chat about whatever. But I really want to be able to make decisions on stuff, right? Like the planning board makes decisions, and other boards make decisions. Outside of the incentive policy that we voted on last year, we haven't made a decision. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't recall all of them, but I just feel like there's got to be more that we should be involved in, influencing something, because otherwise I'm not sure what the purpose of the board is if we're not helping to make decisions. So I'll shut up at that point, but I just wanted to, sort of voice my concern that, it's not really serving a point if we're not really making decisions, as you said, Jacob, right? So anyway.
Yep.
The interesting thing is, and I've thought this over as well, is I feel like the board will evolve, right? We needed to have a original starting point, and our starting point was helping with the affordable housing plan. It was helping with the incentive policies and that type of thing. I see our purpose evolving over time to maybe we will be like an EAB. I'm not sure, and that's all something that council needs to decide at that point whether or not they want another board having input on the planning process. Yep. So that's something to. Because the technical rules and ordinances that created this board have to change to reflect that, if that's the case.
Would it be worth, this board was created by council, and our primary responsibility really was evaluating the incentive zoning plan, and now that that's done, is it worthwhile going back and ask for what council wants out of us now?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
It's a great question.
Yeah.
Great question.
So right now we have an advisory board appointment process that the board will be, or the council will be considering in December at their work session. So I think a component of that work session could be kind of the roles and responsibilities of our advisory boards. There are several changes that have been requested. For example, Public Art is a subcommittee of the Parks and Rec Board, and so they've asked to be their own standalone. Well, in order to be their own standalone, we need to discuss what their roles and responsibilities look like. And so this conversation related to HAB aligns with that. So it might be wise for us to schedule that as part of the discussion for December.
Okay, we're going over time. I apologize for that. Any other comments to take us out the door here? No?
May I just want to get clarification, because in December you'll be receiving a calendar for consideration. And so is it the pleasure of the board that we prepare one for quarterly and one for every other month? I just need to make sure that we've got direction so that we are effective when we come back in December.
Why don't you do both of them, and that'll give people an idea of what difference it would make. Yeah.
Okay.
If that's not too much trouble, I think that would.
It's not too much trouble. We need to go ahead and be getting dates on calendars now, because December will be the last month of the year, and so if there was a clear direction, but it doesn't sound like there is at this time.
No. And I will say too that if our duties do change, we would need to be almost monthly at that point.
Yes.
Yeah, certainly if the charge changes, yeah.
Depending on
I just don't see any need for that change now, because we don't know what. I think that's more of I agree with Paul. I think it's more of a conversation for your council. Really, I think that's a really good idea.
And it would really depend on the change of the charge, right?
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
We were able to get what we did get done before meeting quarterly. So just because we've got a new charge doesn't mean necessarily we have to meet any more frequently. Depends on the timeline that council wants out of us.
Yeah.
Is there any penalty, I don't know if that's the right word, but for like if we had, let's say we hypothetically scheduled 6 board meetings and advisory board meetings, and we said, all right, we don't need 2 of these, and we cancel them. Is that a no? I don't know, because I don't know operations.
No.
There's no business.
No, and so that's often what happens, like with Board of Adjustment. If they don't receive any appeals, then they'll cancel. If EAB has no active rezoning cases to review, then they'll cancel. So
that's another thought, I guess. Too.
Well, and it works the same way. Well, and I would say it works the same way that if you had quarterly meetings and you needed to schedule special meetings, then you could schedule those as well.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
We've done that.
Yeah, we have done that.
But it's been a struggle to find the dates.
Yeah, it's
so
hard.
Maybe doing it ahead of time.
No, I kind of just throw it over to Alan. He knows how to do that kind of stuff to schedule it.
He's pretty good.
He is good at it. I don't know.
Okay.
We do our best.
You have your information now?
Yes, so we'll bring back 2 calendars.
Okay.
And then it sounds like we'll bring back the possibility of this location or the 3rd floor, and then you all can discuss that as well.
Okay, that'd be
Does that
great.
work? Okay.
Very
We'll
good.
go ahead and reserve dates on the calendars now so that we can just release them if they're not needed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Al.
Very good. Motion for adjournment.
So moved.
All right, we're adjourned.
Oh.
I just wonder who this lady is that came in the back